Hello, welcome to Block 2, Solving Problems with Multiplication and Division, Lesson 6. I'll share my screen. So, in your previous lesson, you learned how to multiply with zero point 0.1, also called tens, or and 0.01, also called hundredth. You learned that to multiply by zero point 0.1 is the same thing as dividing by 10. And then to multiply by zero point zero 0.01 is the same thing as dividing by 100. In today's lesson, we're going to focus on learning how to convert metric units. It's an interesting lesson. Pay attention because I'm sure some of the things you would see in this lesson, you should see in your kitchen. So if you love cooking with mom or dad or anyone and you use some measuring containers or you measure things, you're going to find this lesson really interesting. Before we start, I want to ask you for a favor. Support our global mission of educating children around the world, regardless of their economic circumstance. They should be able to get a video online and have a really good maths education, regardless of where they're born. So, to help us do that, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video with those you think can benefit, and click on the notification bell so that when we upload new videos, you will know about it. Thank you. Before we start, I would like you to do these retrieval practice questions in 3 minutes. You can take a shorter time or a longer time. Work at your own pace. I really want you to enjoy learning maths. All right. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the questions, here are the answers. For the first one, you ask, write down the abbreviation for the metric units. So, metric units are units that you would find, are units of measurement that you will find they are used in most countries. So, it's an international standard that most countries would use for measurements. But in certain countries, such as the United States and in England or the United Kingdom, you hear people measure things quite differently. They understand metric units, but they measure things quite differently. So we're going to talk about the name that we call such measurement. But in this lesson, we focus on metric units, what most of the world use. Okay, so the abbreviation for meters is M. The abbreviation for kilogram is kg. The abbreviation for centiliter is cl. The abbreviation for centimeter is cm. The abbreviation for milliliter is ml. The abbreviation for milligram is mg. Okay, question 2. You were asked which metric unit of measure would you use to measure the length of a pencil? Well, let's look at these units of measurement one after the other, and we make little comments about them that will help us see why we chose what we choose. Okay, grams is used to measure mass, so it's definitely not suitable to measure the length of a pencil. Milliliter is used to measure capacity or volume, so it's not useful. Inches, yes, we could use it to measure the length of a pencil, but we are talking about metric units. So if you go to places like the United States of America or the United Kingdom, you will hear people sometimes talk about inches. That is imperial unit of measurement. It is not metric unit of measurement. So just have a passing knowledge of that. Let's move on with our lesson. Kilometer, yes, we could use it to measure length, but kilometer is used to measure really large lengths. For example, the distance between two places. So centimeter is a suitable unit to measure the length of a pencil. Let's do some new learning for our lesson today. How many centimeters are in 1 meter? We have 100 centimeter in 1 meter. I would like you to write this down on your lesson note because we're going to make reference to these in our subsequent presentation. So in the next slide, when I teach other aspects of this lesson, we'll make use of these facts. So write it down. There are 100 centimeter in 1 meter. So, and that's how it could be written. How many millimeters are in 1 centimeter? There are 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter. So we can write it like that. So write it down. Write this down. It's another fact I want you to write down. How many meters are in 1 kilometer? There are 1,000 meters in 1 kilometer. So write this down. Write this down. Okay, let's use the facts that you wrote down, these facts. I told you to write 3 facts. 100 centimeters is equal to 1 meter. 10 millimeters is equal to 1 centimeter. And then 1,000 meters is equal to 1 kilometer. Let's use the facts to start to solve some problems and to deepen our learning and understanding. So if we ask to convert 400 centimeter to meters, first we're going to write the facts that we know. So we'll write, 100 centimeter is equal to a meter. Now, take note, we want to convert centimeter to meter. I want you to look at this relationship between centimeter and meter. If I ask you to think about what you would have done to 100 to get to 1, you would say, I simply just divided by 100. Of course, you're right. So that means the relationship to go from centimeter to meter is to divide by 100, because just look at the relationship that I told you to write down, the facts that I told you to write down in the previous slide of my presentation. It is 100 centimeter equal to 1 meter. So just looking at this, just this, ignore the 400. If I asked you, how would you get from 100 to 1? What would you have to do? You would say, I have to divide by 100. Of course. So because we know that fact, that's what we're going to do to the 400, and that gives us the equivalent of 4 meters. Okay, let's look at another one. Another way of thinking about it is to draw our bar model. We can say, okay, we know that 100 centimeter is equal to 1 meter, and I need 4 lots of them to make 400. And you can see right there, we have 4 meters because we have 4 lots of 1. Okay, I want you to pause the video and answer these questions real quick. Okay, using the facts that you learned in our previous slide, I want you to answer these questions. See how well you can apply what you've learned. Okay, assuming you've done this, let's review. If we want to convert 450 centimeter, we're going to use exactly what we know how to do. First, we write down the fact or the relationship that we know that I told you to write down. So the relationship between centimeter and meter. Once you've written that fact, you can then use that fact to answer the question. So in this case, we divide by 100. To get from centimeter to meter, you divide by 100. So we do the same to 450, and that gives us 4.5. If you do not know how dividing 450 by 100 give us 4.5, I would ask you to review the lesson we did before this one and the one before that one. So review those 2 lessons. You would really understand how we do decimal division or division with powers of 10. Here, to convert 4 centimeter to meter, we do the same thing, and that gives us 0.04. Now, to convert kilometers to meters, again, remember, you have to write the facts that you know and look at the way we make sure the same units are lined up. Okay? All right? Even though here I told you to write these facts, this one, 1000 meter is equal to kilometer, but because we want to do this conversion for kilometer, look at the way I rearranged it. Okay, it means the same thing, right? I didn't have to write 1000 meter here. I had to write 1 kilometer is equal to 1000 meter and make it correspond or line up with the unit I want to convert from, which is 4 kilometer. Now, looking at this, you say, well, just looking at this, I want to go from kilometer to meter. If I ask you, just looking at this, just this, ignore the 4 kilometer, you would say, to go from kilometer to meter, I just need to multiply by 1000. Okay? Because look, to go from 1 to 1000, you have to multiply by 1000. We are going to have to do the same to kilometer, and that gives us 4000 meters. Okay, it's time for you to pause the video and answer question 1 in 5 minutes. So pause the video and answer question 1 in 5 minutes. All right. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 1, here are the answers. So mark your work and celebrate your success. I'm sure you did very well. All right. So it becomes really easy once you begin to make use of those facts I told you to write. All right. Let's do some new learning before we do some more practice for this lesson. We're going to now convert the following to centimeters. So if we want to convert these to centimeters, remember when we write the relationship between meter and centimeter and millimeter and centimeter, we're going to make sure we write it so that the units correspond on with this one or they line up. So look at this one. Okay, can you see that? We made sure that, yes, we know that 100 centimeters is equal to 1 meter. Or in another way, you can write 1 meter is equal to 100 centimeter. Why? Because we want it to line up with the 7 meter that we're working with. Now, just looking at this one, ignore the 7 meter. You can see that we just need to multiply by 100. For you to get from 1 to 100, you have to multiply by 100. So we'll do the same to the meters, and that gives us 700. We'll do the same with this one. Okay, that gives us 750. If you do not know how we did this, again, I would encourage you to go and watch our previous videos about how to do multiplication with powers of 10, multiplication and division with powers of 10. Here, we know that 1 centimeter is equal to 10 millimeter, but look at the way it's been rewritten to make sure it corresponds with the 40 millimeter in the units, in units. So we say, okay, let's ignore the 40. We've made it to correspond that, okay, there's millimeter on the left-hand side. We know the relationship between millimeter and centimeter. How do we get from 10 to 1, right? From millimeter from 10 to 1. Oh, we're going to have to divide by 10. So you do that to 40. And that gives you 4 centimeter. If we do the same for the 42 millimeter, that gives us 4.2 centimeter. Okay, let's now move and make progress to learn about metric units of weight and capacity. Another word for capacity is volume. Okay, another word for capacity is volume. So let's look at examples of metric units of weight and capacity. Now, take note that when we say weight, you really need to be careful how you use that word, especially when you study science, when your science teacher would tell you weight is not the same as mass. Okay, so really take note. Okay, so for now we're using the word weight, but really know that we should be talking about mass, because I don't want you to get things confused when you study science. So I want you to see this word as mass. Okay. Okay, let's move on. So liters is a measurement of capacity or volume, and you will usually see this with large drink bottles. Okay, for example, really large drink bottles. You see, like your 2 liter bottles or your 1 liter bottles. Centiliter, you would usually see it with a bit smaller drink bottles. So maybe your juice, okay, maybe your, um, different drink bottles that are slightly smaller, than these large ones, which a family can share. This one person can just drink it, okay? And then milliliter would usually be for maybe your can of Coke or Pepsi or Fanta or whatever drink you have in your part of the world. Milliliter, you will usually see it written on bottles like this. Kilogram, you would see it used for really large objects. So this is used to measure mass. Okay, this is used to measure mass. So you see it for really large objects like your tricycle, like your motorcycle would be measured in kilogram. Then grams, you would see it, maybe to measure your pen, your pencil, your book, okay, could be measured in grams. And then milligrams would usually be something like an ant or maybe your cupcake, something small, like really small. Okay. Okay. Now that we know what we know that there are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. 100 centimeters is equal to 1 meter. We know that. Similarly, there are 100 centiliters in 1 liter. Okay. The key word is cent. Now, you may know that there are 100 cents in $1. So the key word is cents. But when you hear the word centi, centi means out of 100. But we'll come to that. Let's talk about kilo. Kilo means thousand. So when you hear the word kilo, it's the root word for thousand. So 4 kilograms simply means 4,000 grams because it's 4 lots of is 4,000 lots. So 4 lots of 1,000 grams. Then centi means out of 100. So if you hear centiliter, it means something out of 100 liters. So if I say, for example, so centi means hundredth. So if I say, for example, 18 centiliters, it means 18 out of 100 liters. Okay. So, of course, when you write it out, you now know how to write things like this in decimal form. That would be 0.18 liters. Milli means thousandth. So 1,000 times smaller. So when you hear milli, it means out of 1,000. So, for example, if you hear or see 452 milligrams, it would mean 452 thousandth of gram. Okay, so you do that out of 1,000, you write it as a decimal, and then you write gram. Let's say, for example, you hear the word milliliter, it's going to be out of 1,000. So, for example, if I say 250 milliliter, which you would see in your measuring jug in your kitchen when you're doing baking or when you're cooking, it means 250 over 1,000, then liter. Okay, so milliliter. So you need to express the milli, and then you know it's liters in front of your unit. Okay, So from what you've learned, it's time for you to do some practice. So pause the video and answer question 2 in 2 minutes. So assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the questions, here are the answers. So mark your work and celebrate your success. So here you simply ask to convert these measures, okay? And you've been given the values here. You simply want to make them into gram, this one into meters, and this one into milliliters, okay? All right, let's move on. Pause the video and answer question 3 in 2 minutes. So by now, you know the units, you know the relationship that connects these units. So you should be able to do it really quickly. You're now really efficient and you understand this. So well done for learning, for sticking around. Well done. Let's keep going. Okay, assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the questions, here are your answers. So mark your work and celebrate your success. Well done. All right. Assuming you've marked your work and you've did really well, so give yourself a pat on the back. Well done. Here is question 4. Pause the video and answer question 4 in 3 minutes. All right. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 4, here are the answers. So mark your work and celebrate your success. So we're making really good use of our understanding of metric units and their relationships. All right. Pause the video and answer question 5 in 2 minutes. Okay, assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the question, here is question 5. So here you ask, a jug contains 2.55 liter of juice. A glass can hold 200 ml. So here is the jug and here is the glass, right? How many full glasses of juice can be poured using the juice in the jug? And then next you ask, how much juice will be left in the jug? Give your answer in liters. Okay, I need to discuss this one. All right. So for some of you, so this is a typical problem solving question. So we want to find out how many of these we can get from this. Now, take note, they are not the same unit. So we're going to have to make these into milliliters. Now, what do we know? So we know that 1 liter, okay, 1 liter is 1000 milliliter. Okay, so we want to make it have the same unit. So 2.55, okay, to get from here to here, we'll multiply by 1000. So we have to multiply this by 1000. So this will be, when we times by 1000, this will be 2550 milliliter. So now that we have the same units, the next step we're going to do is to do 2550 divided by 200. Okay, that's how we get this. So we're going to have 12 glasses. So we're going to have a number 12 point something. We'll have a number and some fraction. Okay, we'll have a number and some fraction. Now it is that fraction that gives us this number of juice left. Now take note that it is in liters, but what you're going to have, remember your answer is in milliliters. So whatever fraction you get, you're going to have to convert that fraction back to liters by dividing it by 1000. That is how we got this number here. Okay, let's move on. Here you ask, pause the video and answer questions 6 and 7 in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the questions, here are the answers. Okay, here you ask, Hyun is 167 centimeter tall. Kim is 0.15 meter taller than Hyun. Okay, how tall is Kim in meters? Now take note, you're going to have to convert this one to meters before you add her height, because she is this taller. So you're going to have you're going to have to convert this. This will be 1.67, and then you add 0.15 to it. That will give you your answer. Next, what is the distance between the lake and the train station? So you see the train station, lake is that way, train station is that way. We're going to have to convert that to kilometer before we add that to that. Okay, so if you convert this to kilometer, you're going to divide by 1,000. So it's a bit like adding. So if you convert this to kilometer, this will be to divide by 1,000. Okay, so this will be 0.85. Now, the distance between them is this one plus this one. So 2.5, that will be 5, that will be 13. We'll carry 1, and that will be 3. So that's why we got 3.35. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson. So what we've learned so far, we have learned how to convert between metric units. We learned metric unit of length, metric unit of mass, and metric unit of capacity. Using these units, you would be able to solve a lot of problems that involves metric unit conversion. Really well done for sticking around and for learning. Until next time, take really good care of yourself, and bye-bye.